Hey, what's up, metal and heavy music fans? It's Flight of Icarus again with MetalTrenches.com, and today I'm going to rank the discography of melodic death metal band AMON AMARTH. And hey, if you like to be kept up to date with the best and brightest metal bands and albums from the underground and above, then stick with me by hitting that subscribe button down below. Alright, y'all, this is going to be a big one. So we got a lot of albums to get through, but I'm going to be moving along, and it'll be interesting to talk about each one of these. And we got to start back at the beginning, though, with Once Sent from the Golden Hall. I believe I have my dates right, but you can feel free to correct me in the comments. Wouldn't be the first time. I have 1998. I actually really enjoy AMON AMARTH's early efforts. Like, there's something about the production on these. It's like raw. The guitars have almost like some blackened vibes to them, just a little bit scorched, and just the aggression of it. You know, this is first and foremost like a Viking metal band, and these early albums are the ones that truly make me like believe that they're coming through and setting fire to the village and pillaging and just killing everyone. Like, it's all about that on these early albums. Friends from the Sun Cross, one of my personal favorites on this album. Those big triumphant riffs from the very beginning. Like, I think that struck me. Obviously, I kind of came into their discography later on, but as I backtracked, I got just more and more impressed with just how consistent their songwriting and their guitars and their hooks have been this entire time. And then the title track closing it out too. Another really fantastic track on this album. But yeah, it's really solid, especially as a debut going all the way back. And I'd put these late 90s albums right up there with like the Gothenburg albums that I love so much. So yeah, I have to give it like a B, if I can find it. There you are. I'm giving it like a B. I think I was giving it a B. Yeah. B feels good. Like, I put it pretty high up from the very beginning. I like that early sound, and that carries through as well into the Avenger just a year later. Again, like, I think it actually takes everything Once Sent from the Golden Hall did and just steps it up and pretty much like perfects it. As far as like the early career melodic death metal AMON AMARTH sound goes, the Avenger is where it's at. Like, this is personally like one of my favorites, and Bleed for the Ancient Gods is a great album opener, one of their best, I would honestly say. And it's just like, I know it's straight, it's simplistic, it's to the point, but great riffs again, really aggressive. I love the vocals. Just really catchy, but also that balance with the ugliness. And I kind of miss this raw production, which is something I'm going to talk about much later in terms of what I don't like about some of the newer albums. But I just miss this. There's something about that late 90s production that worked so well for these melodic death metal albums, and just gave them that extra sense of atmosphere, and the listening space just feels so vast, and you get a sense that everything's just like on fire, just like with the album cover. And one of my personal favorite AMON AMARTH songs on here too, this opener is amazing. I just had to let that play by itself. I freaking love that. It gets me so amped every time I hear it. This is a pump you up song for sure. Like, great, just like weightlifting music basically, in addition to being perfect Viking murder music as well. So yeah, The Avenger, another great album. I put it just a little bit above the last album. Where are you? I'm like having trouble seeing things. There you are. But still kind of B tier, because I've got other albums that I like even more than this one, and I gotta save space for them. So let's do that, though. Let's move on to 2001 with The Crusher. This is one of my, for a long time, it was actually kind of like my least favorite, or one of my least favorite AMON AMARTH albums. It's still decent, but it's like, it feels like a retread of kind of the Avenger in many ways. I think there's more melodic moments, which is cool, but there's also like the songwriting's weaker. It feels like they're kind of running out of steam with this particular style. I do love the sound of 8 Hooves. Great opener there, that guitar riff. Just very triumphant, again, this big marching, driving riff. powerful stuff. But yeah, for each one of those, there's kind of some weaker songs too. But I do like releasing Surtur's Fire. I like Risen from the Sea. So there's good moments on here, but not quite as good as those other two efforts. And so, yeah, it's just sort of like, all right, we've already been there, done that. What are we going to do next? And this is where I feel like we kind of start to see the shift in their sound too. So I put this one at about D tier, really. It is definitely... Actually, you know what? No. I have other ones I want to put there. I'm going to put that at C. Because it's still a fun and listenable album. It's just kind of like sort of average and not as consistent. But let's move forward to Versus the World from 2002. And this is where you start to hear that kind of more classic mid-paced AMON AMARTH. Great opening track, Death and Fire. One of my favorites from them probably overall. I love those big pounding drums. And you just hear this shift where it's less about speed at this point and that aggression and more so about like kind of like sort of storytelling qualities, I guess I'd say, but still like that fiery production. And yeah, it's a good album. I will say it's a little bit slow for me overall. I find it to be, I get a little bored listening to it. And I know in particular, love this riff though, by the way. I know in particular Quest for Metal really loves this album and had it in one of his videos recently as kind of like one of his favorites. And he loves the longer, slower stuff. I'm just more into that speed. So for me, I get a little sleepy, honestly, listening to this. But it's like, it's still a good album. Like the songwriting's solid. The production's really great. It's got a nice balance to it. And there's some really cool moments. Of course, the title track too. Like when you get into the chorus, you can't help but sing along with the Versus the World. There it is. Perfect. Across the Rainbow Bridge is pretty solid too. So yeah, good moments. But yeah, just a little I like this riff. Almost like a doomier album for them. And then after that, it kind of like wanes a bit for me too. And like I said, I just get kind of bored. So that drags it down a little bit for me. And so I end up putting it about on the same level as the Crusher. And I know that's really going to hurt some people. I think there's going to be a lot of like kind of eyebrow furrowing moments, which frequently comes up on these tier lists. You can't please everyone, but I think in particular, some of my choices on here are definitely going to be interesting, but they're just my own. As always, let me know down in the comments what your rankings are, and I will leave the link to this actual tool so you can do it and share it and we can talk through it. But yeah, for me, it's just not one of my favorite albums to listen to. Definitely better than The Crusher, but I enjoy listening to these two more. So, going on from there, we've got Fate of Norns, and speaking of boring, this whole album just like bores me to tears, honestly. Like the songwriting just feels really uninspired, and then the production is like weaker too. And maybe it's just like my copy, so maybe that's not fair, but it just feels like it doesn't have that same full sound. It's got the grittiness, but without the like finesse to it, and so it's just a really ugly sounding record. But even that aside, like I find most of the songs to be really kind of on the boring side. Just a lot of just kind of like meandering moments that don't really go in. There's like a whole spoken word section on here, isn't there? Yeah, this whole thing is just like super corny. Title track's okay. It's got some okay moments. But for me, like this is... this part too, the Pursuit of Vikings riff is solid. Good stuff here. Still a little bit slow for my taste, and there are better songs. Beheading of a King is also pretty decent. But again, between those... Yeah, good riff there. But between those, there's just a lot of just sort of meandering stuff that I just don't really get into, find to be kind of contrived, and just doesn't really interest me. And again, I'm sure there are people out there who feel totally differently, but for me, this is D tier. Like, this is one of their worst albums, or at least my least favorite albums to listen to from them. But now, this seems to happen a lot. I didn't even notice this as I was putting this together, but we're jumping from my least favorite, or one of my least favorite AMON AMARTH albums, to my favorite. This album, with Odin on our side, there's a reason why this album frequently tops lists. it's like the perfect balance of kind of like, this is where they really honed that like mid-pace sound they were going for and just perfected it here. It is so good. As you can see, I've favorited pretty much like every song. There's so many good riffs, so many hooks. Every song is like a single. Very consistent, just a very enjoyable listen, and nice and tight too at just 43 minutes. This is perfect. Valhalla Waits Me, great opener, sets the tone for the whole album. Asator, also very good. And they brought back, the production is definitely better on this one again. Feels a lot fuller, a lot more epic. This is another riff where it sounds like the guitars are literally like the fire's burning down the village. Fire! So good. I mean, the lyrics match the sound of the guitar tone so perfectly. It's the perfect balance of what I loved about their early aggressive moments that I talked about, and then kind of the newer style that they moved into. But yeah, just with still all the hooks intact. Title track is great. There's like nothing bad I can say about this album. This is the perfect AMARTH album. Anytime I recommend somebody AMARTH and they say, what album should I start with, I always say this album. Like, I think it's the perfect starting point. Love Cry of the Blackbirds too. Like, great like sad song that just is so emotional. More great riffs. Excellent melodies. I love that guitar part. And then on into the Northern Star too. Just a big, powerful... That guitar lead, man, it gets me in the feels, which is impressive for like kind of a campy Viking metal band. But all right, I can't gush on this forever. Should be obvious at this point. That is an S tier album for sure, with Odin on our side. And then we move onwards and upwards to Twilight of the Thunder God, another fantastic album that I absolutely adore. Another one that you'll see very high on most people's lists, I feel like, for good reason. More great singles on here. Moving into, again, like the even more modern age, moving towards the 2010s almost, in 2008 here. Just amazing opener here. Twilight of the Thunder God, another one of their best like album openers. One of their best songs ever. Great riffs, great vocals, great sing-along chorus. The door of mankind. So good. Your destiny awaits. So excellent. Even the deeper cuts on here too. Like, I know I haven't favorited as many of these tracks, but that's by no means to say that they're not great. Most of them have 5 stars on my list here. But some of my personal favorites though, Tattered Banners and Bloody Flags. This chuggy opening riff with the little triplets here. And then it builds into this long, more foreboding kind of sound. It's, again, another, like, it's not that I don't like slow AMARTH, it's that they just got to get the formula just right. And I feel like on some of the other albums they don't. And on here, they do it just right, and then they mix it up with the faster songs too. Live for the Kill's great too. This is more like a classic heavy metal riff mixed in. Almost feels like something out of Iron Maiden or Judas Priest. And then it builds into this another very sad, mournful, heartstring-pulling riff here, too. Yeah, great album. Twilight of the Thunder God. Fantastic. Definitely deserving of a high spot. I consider putting it at S tier. It's kind of somewhere between like S tier and A tier for me, because again, I never like having too many albums S tier. I think that's kind of corny. I also hate it when people say everything's S tier. No, it's not, because if everything's S tier, nothing's S tier. You have to gradiate them somehow. I'm going to put it at A tier though, because I also want to talk about the next album, Surtur Rising, which honestly, from 2011, I like a little bit more than Twilight of the Thunder God. I think it's even more consistent. It has more great songs overall. War of the Gods, another great opener. I love that album cover too. That's one of my favorite album covers from there. It's like the quintessential album cover for AMARTH. You want people to be like, what's AMARTH sound like? I will show them the Certur Rising album cover. It's like, that's what they sound like. That's exactly what they sound like. What you see there, that's what you can expect. Destroyer of the Universe. Great stuff. just very like death metal record. Like this is a much more like a lot deeper vocals. It's almost brutal sounding at times, but still with those hooks, still with those melodies. Excellent. So good. Slaves of Fear. Slower build on this one. But then more again. The riffs. I'm a guitar guy. I'm a sucker for those classic Gothenburgy sounding riffs. And this is just full of them. So much good stuff. I didn't favorite for Victory or Death, but that's another good one. And then A Beast Am I. Easy favorite there. Just so fast. So fast and hard-hitting and aggressive. Just a total banger of a track. Just straight up death metal. Great scream-along chorus. A Beast Am I. So good. I love this album. I think that this may be the other S-tier album for me. For my personal tastes. I know that might be a controversial pick. I'm not entirely sure. But it's definitely up there. But let's go even further to 2013 with Deceiver of the Gods. Another great album. Remember, there were kind of mixed reactions to this album in some of the retread, but there are some bangers on here. The opening track again, the title track. One of the best riffs I think they've ever put together. One of their best tracks. I think it's the 1-2 punch of this and As Loki Falls. I love this. This whole like epic war opener, and then it transitions into that tapping part. It's so good. Plus, who doesn't love Loki? Like, Loki's a great conceptual character to follow. But that's not it, though. Like, those are my personal favorites. Love that opener with the setting the tone with some gore there. Great riffs. We Shall Destroy, solid stuff, and an interesting track that I kind of was hoping they'd explore more on further releases is Hell. Because Hell has this very interesting and unique sound where it's this slow, kind of groovy death metal song, and then they tie in some of these weird, like, heavy metal vocals here. Like Dio sounding vocals. I'm sure someone in the comments will be like, well, that's a guest vocalist from so-and-so. Let me know, because I'm not positive. But this track has always intrigued me. I think it's really cool, and I was kind of hoping they'd do more stuff like that in the future. But unfortunately, that has not really been the case, which I'll just get into. But as far as where does Deceiver of the Gods fit, I put it A tier. Really solid album. Enjoy quite a bit of their newer albums. It's definitely up there. But now we're going to move into Jomsviking, and I actually don't even have Jomsviking in here because honestly, I don't have a lot of good things to say about either of these last two albums. In fact, I had to re-download Berserker just to talk about it, and never bought Jomsviking because it's so boring. It's just so boring. I know some people absolutely loved this album, and that's fine. And I do get there's the whole conceptual piece of it. You've got like the story, an actual like story following a character. But I remember the lead singles came out, and when even AMARTH lead singles don't catch your attention, you know there's a problem. Because even if the album's not that good, the singles are always great. And none of the singles caught me. I like kept re-listening to them, like hoping, praying that I would be like, okay, I'm going to come around. Like eventually this is just going to click. But even to this day, re-listening, I'm just like, I don't get it. I don't get what people see in this album. It just bores me to tears. The songwriting I feel to be uninspired. The concept doesn't even like particularly intrigue me. There's nothing like unique about it. And yeah, overall, it's a D tier album. It's not F tier. I don't really think they have any truly F tier albums, but I have no interest in continuing to re-listen to this album. I'll continue trying just for the sake of like humoring people who love it and say, man, you'll just like get it one day. I'll try. I'm always open-minded. Sometimes albums do click like that much later on for me, like even a decade later. But so far, not so much with that one. And same feelings about Berserker so far. Just not in love with this album. And mainly, it's going back to what I alluded to before. It's the production first and foremost. The production is just so flat and lifeless. And even when the songwriting's okay and the guitar riffs are there, because I'll catch myself listening and I'll be like, wow, this part, I'll bet it will sound great live. And I'm sure that's true. But it just has this flat, like, rock and roll kind of production. And you really hear it in the guitars. And there's just, like, no space for it. Like, all of those other albums that I love so much have this big, grand, epic sound to them. And, see, I like this riff. I like this Crack the Sky opening riff. But it's just so... You get into this part, and there's no, like, atmosphere. It's just this flat, constrained, compressed listening space that wasn't helped by the music videos either, where they had, like, the weird, like, them just, like, at the show, none of the Viking imagery, and it was very just odd choices all around. Just, I don't know. It's just not for me. It's not for me. I was re-listening again, seeing if maybe I'd changed my mind or if my ears had kind of changed or shifted. But it's just, again, kind of just an uninspired sounding album for me. Songwriting's okay, but it just feels kind of tired, and especially, again, the production. Maybe with better production, I'd appreciate this album more. But there's nothing about it that, like, really stands out to me. And even most of the riffs are just kind of like, I've heard that, but they've done it better before. So I'm going to listen to that album. Yeah, that is Berserker, and so same thoughts here. Going to put it at D tier. I know that's probably going to upset a lot of people, but you know what? You can't please everyone, and it's my opinion. Too bad. But now it's your turn. You can let me know down in the comments. What's your favorite AMONth album? How would you rank them? Like I said, I will leave a link for this in the description, and I'd love to have a conversation. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches. Jesus, I think I just one-taked that whole thing.